I am Jake Soloman, lead designer of XCOM Enemy Unknown. We've been working on XCOM for 3.5, almost 4 years at this point. And we started after Civ Rev at Firaxis, and it took a long time, And so we told the publisher, this is going to take a long time, we need more time. And so we'd been working on it for a while, and it was all new design systems. It's such a complicated game. And then when it started to come together, that's when we started to talk about, okay, it's ready. We can start to talk about it. And that was the point at which we decided to announce.
So it wasn't a response to the fan feedback with the Marin FPS?
No, no, I can say that for a fact. I mean, yeah, we knew about the Marin title. They certainly knew about us, and we worked together we've worked together for 3 years now, back and forth. So it's interesting. I guess you work in your own little world for a long time, but we knew about each other, and it wasn't a big deal to us. And so we were surprised at some of the reaction we got, at how big of a surprise our title was. Because we both had worked together, and we're both excited about each other's games. And so, no, it was truly, I can say this honestly, it was truly just a case of that's what the schedule was.
I know they share the same universe, but is there anything else that kind of goes across the two games?
Yeah, actually, and it's something that we're not talking about yet, but it is something like Jordan, who's the narrative director on their title, like he and I work together quite a bit, and so we've had a lot of interesting conversations, and yeah, I mean, there are certain things that go between the titles that we're sort of excited when we do get to talk about them, but definitely there are some tie-ins there.
So what kind of pillars of gameplay have you taken across from the original 90s version into the kind of this version?
Oh man, a lot. So we started, when I first made the prototype of this game, I started with the original, so the game from '94. And with that as our base, we sort of worked on that, iterated on that, and we always said that anything that we change to this game has to be an improvement. And so a lot of those core systems from that first game, they remain because they're strong mechanics. Obviously some of them have changed. But in terms of it being turn-based, that of course had to be the way that worked. Science, engineering, interception, a lot of the aliens from the original game. We've expanded what they can do, their powers, but those all come from the original.
So what have you learned from the last 10 years of building RTS games that you've brought forward into XCOM to kind of take on this new evolution?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think that what we've learned is, I guess, that we can still make complicated, complex gameplay. Obviously we make the PC civs and things like that, and it's something that we believe we can do, and we don't have to dumb that stuff down. I mean, I think that we just have a lot of faith. We have a big audience, right? Like PC civ sells tons, and so we just have faith that there's a big strategy audience out there, and so we don't ever lose sleep about like, okay, do we need to simplify this? Are people going to understand that? Because this game isn't even, I think, in some ways as complex as a PC civ. And so that gives us a lot of faith that we can make the game we want to make. We can make it really strategic. We can have all this depth, and we don't lose a lot of sleep about are people going to get it, because we know that there's a big audience that loves strategy games.
What about working with the consoles? How have you found that? There's always this big stigma about RTS and consoles.
Yeah, and I mean, because we're turn-based, it makes it a lot easier. So, we put Civilization Revolution, like that was on the consoles, and I think that was one way, again, to what you talked about earlier. That was something that showed us, like, we can do the types of games we make, they work really well on the console. And for XCOM specifically, input isn't particularly complicated. Certainly the things you can do are complex, but in terms of interacting with your soldiers, you're just taking them, moving them to a point, choosing actions to do, and that's the sort of thing that worked really well on the consoles.
Being from the 90s to this version, is there a lot of pressure to innovate but not change too much, considering the old school fans?
Yeah, there is. And it's fair, but yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that until I can put the game in people's hands, I mean, it's natural for people to feel a little anxiety, because everything that I change, and XCOM being such a big game. There are thousands of things that people out there would say you cannot change that, or otherwise it's not XCOM. And so that's been my experience, is that like there are a lot of things that I'll change, and there's always a little bit of feedback, and I'm just confident that once I can put it in people's hands that they'll understand why those changes were made.
And it's meant to be more accessible and streamlined than the 90s version. I mean, how have you done that?
Yeah, I mean, accessibility sometimes comes off as a bad word, but I think that the easiest way to do that with a game like XCOM, it's not complicated to play. I mean, you saw the demo, and even the original game, it really isn't that complex of a game in terms of your input. I think that it was a little bit limited by the UI from 20 years ago, and so just by being able to sort of clean up the player's interaction with the game, we haven't lost a lot of complexity there. It just immediately becomes more accessible.